The moment Emma grabbed the microphone at our 20-year high school reunion and announced, "Let's be honest, Sarah's too poor to even be here," with that perfectly practiced laugh, the room went silent. 200 people, all dressed up, holding champagne glasses, staring at me like I was a stray dog that had wandered into a yacht club. My fiancé, David, tensed beside me and whispered, "We need to leave. Now." But I couldn't move. I just stood there in my dress, the one Emma had commented on earlier with a pitying smile, saying it was cute in that tone that meant anything but. What Emma didn't know, what nobody in that ballroom knew, was that 6 months ago, I'd won $40 million in the lottery, and I was about to make sure she found out. Before I continue the story, please subscribe. I need to reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep bringing you stories like this every day. It's just one click for you, but it means a lot to me. I met Emma when we were 7 years old, and I thought I'd won the friendship lottery. Ironic, considering. She lived in the biggest house on our street, the one with the circular driveway and the pool in the back, while my family rented a duplex 3 blocks away where you could hear the neighbors argue through the walls. Emma had everything: the clothes, the toys, the birthday parties with our actual ponies, and for some reason, she chose me to be her best friend. I was so grateful. That's the thing nobody tells you about unequal friendships. You spend so much time being thankful that the popular girl picked you that you don't notice you're auditioning for the role every single day. Emma would come over to my house and reorganize my closet because, "I know what looks good on you, Sarah." She'd lay out my outfit for school picture day, and I'd wear exactly what she chose because she had taste, and I didn't, right? When we'd go to the mall, she'd pay for my ice cream and make sure to announce it loud enough for the other girls to hear. "Don't worry, I've got you," she'd say with this beneficent smile, like she was running a charity. I'd thank her profusely, and she'd wave it off. That's what best friends do. But best friends don't keep a mental tally, and Emma absolutely kept a tally. Every favor, every loan of a shirt, every ride her mom gave me, it all went into this invisible ledger that she'd cash in whenever she needed something. "Remember when I bought you that pretzel?" she'd say when she wanted me to cover for her with her parents or do her homework. I didn't see the red flags because I was 7, then 10, then 13. And by then the pattern was so established that it felt normal. I thought I was lucky to have a friend like Emma. I thought the problem was that I didn't have enough to offer in return. I thought I was the charity case, and she was the saint for tolerating me. High school was when Emma really came into her power, and I became her full-time supporting actress. She was homecoming queen junior and senior year. She dated Tyler Brennan, the quarterback, who looked like he'd been photoshopped into existence. She had the perfect hair, the perfect car her parents bought her for her 16th birthday, the perfect life. And I was the loyal best friend who held her purse at parties, who covered for her when she snuck out, who did her calculus homework while she was too busy being worshipped. I told myself I didn't mind. I told myself that's what friendship looked like: sacrifice and support. But the incidents kept piling up, each one a little paper cut that I ignored until I was covered in scars. Emma would forget to save me a seat at lunch, so I'd end up eating in the library. She'd borrow my ideas for English class. I'm talking full concepts I'd brainstorm with her, then present them as her own and get the A while I got a B- for my backup idea. When I confronted her once, she laughed and said, "You should be flattered. Your ideas sound better coming from me anyway." The worst was junior prom. I'd been talking to Jake Martinez for months. He was sweet, kind of shy, and he'd finally asked me to prom. I was so excited, I made the mistake of telling Emma. 2 days later, she cornered Jake after practice and worked her magic. By the end of the week, Jake was taking Emma to prom instead. When I asked her what happened, she shrugged and said, "He's too good for you anyway, Sarah. But don't worry, I'll make sure he treats you nice after I'm done with him." Like she was doing me a favor. Like I should thank her for stealing my date and promising me her leftovers. And you know what? I forgave her. I always forgave her, because that's what best friends do. I went to prom alone, watched her dance with Jake all night, and convinced myself that she was right. He was too good for me. and Emma was just looking out for me in her own way. That's what abuse does. It makes you the defense attorney for your own mistreatment. After graduation, our lives split like a fork in the road, except one path was paved with gold and the other was held together with duct tape and wishful thinking. Emma went to an expensive private college that her parents paid for in full. No student loans, no working through school, just sorority life and spring breaks in Cabo. By 23, she'd married Marcus, a venture capitalist who wore suits that cost more than my monthly rent. The wedding was massive: country club, ice sculptures, a designer dress that had its own Instagram account. I was a bridesmaid, which sounds like an honor until you realize I had to pay for my own dress, $400, plus hair, makeup, the bachelorette trip to Miami, and a wedding gift. I maxed out my credit card and told Emma it was fine when she said, "Don't worry, you'll look so good in the photos, it'll be worth it." Meanwhile, I went to community college because that's what I could afford. I worked retail at the mall, folding clothes that cost what I made in a week, getting yelled at by customers who looked right through me. I scraped by, living in a studio apartment with a radiator that clanged all night and a landlord who took 3 months to fix anything. Emma's social media became a highlight reel of her perfect life. Vacations to Bali and Paris, designer handbags casually tossed on marble countertops, her massive house with the chef's kitchen she never cooked in, her and Marcus at charity galas, looking like they'd stepped out of a magazine. The comparison was constant and crushing. I'd scroll through her photos late at night after a shift where I'd been on my feet for 8 hours and feel like I'd failed at life, like we'd started at the same place and she'd figured out the secret while I was still stumbling around in the dark. I never considered that maybe she'd just been handed everything on a silver platter. I thought the problem was me, that I wasn't smart enough, ambitious enough, worthy enough. That's what people like Emma do to you. They make their advantages look like achievements and your struggles look like character flaws. The thing about Emma's cruelty is that it was never obvious enough to call out. It was wrapped in concern, delivered with a sympathetic head tilt and a hand on my arm. "I worry about you, Sarah," she'd say over coffee at places she'd pick, expensive cafes where a latte cost $12. "Have you thought about getting a better job? You're so smart. You could do so much more." Like I was working retail because I enjoyed being broke, not because I was still paying off my community college loans. Once, she actually said, "You know, Marcus has a friend who needs a house cleaner. I could put in a word for you. The pay is really good." She said it like she was offering me a career opportunity, not suggesting I scrub her social circle's toilets. The loans were the worst. Emma would offer to help me out financially, which sounds generous until you realize every loan came with strings attached. She'd forget I paid her back and mention the money I still owed her in front of other people. Or she'd bring it up months later when she wanted something. "Remember when I helped you out with rent that time?" I did remember. I also remembered paying her back in full, but somehow Emma's memory was more selective. She'd choose expensive restaurants for our lunches, order appetizers and wine. Then when the bill came, she'd say, "Let's just split it down the middle, that's easier." Easier for her, maybe. I'd end up paying $60 for a salad I didn't want, while she'd had the steak and 3 martinis. My other friends started pointing it out. Jessica, who I'd met at work, finally said it outright after meeting Emma. "That woman is not your friend. She talks to you like you're a project, not a person." But I defended Emma. I always defended Emma. "You don't know her like I do," I'd say. "She's just trying to help. She means well." The truth is, I knew something was wrong. I felt it every time we hung out, this tightness in my chest, this exhaustion after spending time with her. But I couldn't name it because naming it meant admitting I'd wasted 20 years on someone who'd never actually cared about me. It meant admitting I'd been a prop in someone else's performance of generosity. So I kept making excuses, kept showing up, kept letting her treat me like a charity case she was too good to abandon. I think part of me believed that if I could just prove I was worthy, she'd finally treat me like an equal. I didn't realize that Emma needed me to be less than. That was the whole point of our friendship. 6 months before the reunion, I did what I did every Friday, stopped at the gas station on my way home from work and bought a single lottery ticket. $2. That was my one indulgence, my little fantasy ritual. I'd pick random numbers, stuff the ticket in my wallet, and forget about it until the next week when I'd throw it away and buy a new one. I never checked them. It was more about the dream than the reality. But that particular Friday, David asked me to check the ticket before I tossed it. He was always more practical than me, always saying, "You never know." So I pulled up the winning numbers on my phone while we were eating takeout Chinese on the couch, and I looked at my ticket, and the room started spinning. All 6 numbers matched. All 6. I checked 3 times, then 4. Then I handed my phone and the ticket to David and said, "Am I reading this right?" His face went white. $40 million. That's what we'd won. $40 million. The next few hours were a blur of panic and disbelief. We called the lottery commission at 8 in the morning. Couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything else. They confirmed it. We drove to their office in a daze, signed paperwork, got connected with lawyers and financial advisors who suddenly treated me like I was made of glass and gold. They set up a trust fund, explained tax implications, told us horror stories about lottery winners who'd lost everything or been harassed by everyone they'd ever known. That's when David and I made the decision. We tell absolutely no one, not my parents, not my co-workers, not Emma, especially not Emma. The reasons seemed obvious. We wanted to protect ourselves from people coming out of the woodwork asking for money. We wanted to see who actually cared about us versus who would suddenly care about us once they knew. David said something that stuck with me. Money doesn't change who people are. It just reveals who they've always been. But more than that, I realized I didn't want to be treated differently. I'd spent my whole life being treated like I was less than because I had less than. The idea of being treated differently because I had more than felt just as dehumanizing, just a different cage. I wanted to know what it felt like to move through the world as just me, not poor Sarah or rich Sarah, just Sarah. So we kept working. I gave my notice quietly, claiming I'd found a remote position. David kept teaching. We kept living in our apartment for a few more months while we figured out our next move. The only thing we did immediately was pay off my parents' mortgage through an anonymous grant program. Watching my mom cry on the phone about that miracle made me cry too. But otherwise, we lived like nothing had changed, except everything had changed. I'd look at Emma's Instagram posts about her new Prada bag or her weekend in the Hamptons and feel nothing, no envy, no inadequacy. Just this crystal clear understanding that none of it mattered. I had more money than she did, and I felt free in a way that had nothing to do with the bank account. I was finally free from needing her approval. Living a double life is stranger than you'd think. I kept going to work for 3 more weeks after winning, smiling through my shifts, folding the same shirts I'd folded 1,000 times. I'd already given my notice to my manager privately, citing a remote opportunity with better pay. But to everyone else, I was still just Sarah who worked at the mall. David kept teaching his high school English classes, grading papers at our kitchen table like always. We still lived in the same cramped apartment with the leaky faucet I'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. Except now we were spending our evenings looking at million-dollar houses in different states, planning our escape. Still drove my 10-year-old Honda with a dent in the bumper and the check engine light that had been on so long I'd started thinking of it as a dashboard decoration. The only indulgence we allowed ourselves immediately was paying off my parents' mortgage. We found an obscure grant program that provided housing assistance to long-time residents, forged some paperwork with our lawyer's help, all technically legal, and made it look like my parents had won some lottery of their own. When my mom called me, sobbing about the miracle, how they'd been chosen out of thousands of applicants, I had to pretend to be surprised. That was hard. Lying to people you love is hard even when you're doing something good. But the freedom was intoxicating. The freedom of knowing I'd never have to check my bank balance before buying groceries again, never have to decide between paying rent or fixing my car, never have to smile through some customer screaming at me about a return policy. The burden, though, was the secret itself. It sat in my chest like a stone, heavy and strange. I'd see people I knew and have to remember to complain about money, to play the part. I'd scroll through Emma's Instagram, her latest Chanel bag, her weekend at some exclusive resort, her humble brag posts about how blessed she was, and feel absolutely nothing. No envy, no inadequacy, no wish that I had what she had, just clarity. Crystal clear, almost eerie clarity. She'd been performing wealth at me for 20 years, using it as a weapon to keep me in my place, and now I had more than she did, and she had no idea. I wasn't even happy about having more. I was just relieved to finally see her clearly, like someone had wiped the fog off a mirror. She wasn't successful and generous, she was insecure and cruel, and I was done auditioning for her approval. David was the only person who knew about the money, and that fact alone told me everything about why I loved him. We'd been together for 3 years, engaged for 1, and he'd loved me when I was eating ramen for dinner 4 nights a week and cutting my own hair to save money. He was a high school English teacher, steady, observant, the kind of person who noticed when you changed your coffee order or when you were pretending to be fine. When the reunion invitation arrived, his first response was, "You don't need to prove anything to these people." We were sitting in bed, and he'd seen my face when I opened the envelope. I'd tried to play it casual, but David knew me too well. Over the next few weeks, as I debated whether to go, he got more direct about Emma. "She doesn't treat you like a friend, Sarah. She treats you like a prop, like a mirror she holds up to make herself look better." I'd gotten defensive, which I always did when someone criticized Emma. "You don't understand our history. We've been friends since we were 7. David had sighed, that patient teacher's sigh he used when a student was being deliberately obtuse. "I understand that you've been putting up with her cruelty since you were 7. That's not friendship. That's just a long-term hostage situation." He'd met Emma a handful of times over the years, awkward double dates, birthday dinners I'd insisted on. Every time, he'd watched her with this quiet concern, the way you'd watch someone juggling knives. After the last dinner, where Emma had spent 2 hours talking about her house renovation and made 3 separate comments about our cozy little apartment, David had said, "I don't think she actually likes you. I think she likes that you make her feel superior." That had stung, because it was true, but I wasn't ready to let go. Some part of me needed to go to that reunion, needed to see if things had changed, if Emma would be different now that we were adults. I told David I wanted to give her one last chance. His response was gentle but firm. "They haven't changed, Sarah. The money doesn't change who they are. It just shows you who they were all along. You're not going to that reunion to see if Emma's different. You're going to prove to yourself that you're not the poor, pathetic friend she's always made you feel like, but you don't need to prove that to anyone. You never did." He wasn't wrong, but I was going anyway. I spent 2 weeks going back and forth about whether to go to that reunion. Part of me wanted to skip it entirely, to just delete the invitation and move on with my new life. But another part of me, the part that had spent 20 years trying to earn Emma's approval, was curious. Would she be different? Would any of those people remember me as more than Emma's charity case? Would anyone care about me as an actual person? I decided to go, but I was strategic about it. I bought a dress that cost $3,000 but looked simple, elegant, understated, the kind of thing that whispered money instead of shouting it. Navy blue, perfectly tailored, no obvious labels. I wanted to look nice without giving Emma ammunition. David agreed to come as moral support, though he made his feelings clear. The drive to the hotel was 40 minutes, and he offered to turn around at least 5 times. "We can still leave," he said at every stoplight. "We can go get pizza and pretend this never happened." I shook my head. I need to do this. I need to give her one last chance to be a real friend. David reached over and squeezed my hand but didn't argue. He knew I had to see this through, had to close this chapter myself. When we pulled into the parking lot of the hotel ballroom, I saw Emma's car immediately, a white Mercedes SUV with a vanity plate that said "Blessed." My stomach dropped. Suddenly, I was 7 years old again, standing outside her big house with the circular driveway, hoping she'd want to play with me. David put the car in park and looked at me. Last chance to run. I took a breath and grabbed my purse, the Birkin I'd bought on impulse but had been too afraid to carry anywhere. Tonight felt like the right time to break it in. Let's go. We walked toward the entrance, my heels clicking on the pavement, and I could hear music and laughter spilling out from inside. I was about to walk into a room full of people who remembered me as poor Sarah, and none of them had any idea that everything had changed. The question was, had they changed? Or was I about to confirm what David had been telling me all along? Walking into that ballroom was like stepping into a living diagram of social hierarchy. The room had already divided itself, the successful people clustered near the bar in their designer clothes and expensive watches, laughing loudly about vacation homes and stock portfolios, while the regular folks congregated near the back, dressed nicely but not extravagantly, talking about their kids and their jobs. I saw Emma immediately. She was holding court in the successful section, of course, surrounded by the same people who'd worshipped her in high school. She spotted me at the exact same moment, and I watched her face do this thing, this micro-expression of displeasure, like she'd just smelled something unpleasant, before the mask slammed into place and she plastered on her smile. She rushed over, arms outstretched for a hug that was all performance. "Sarah, oh my God, you came?" The hug was brief and stiff, and I felt her eyes scanning my outfit over my shoulder. When she pulled back, the once-over was obvious. Her gaze traveled from my shoes to my dress to my bag, calculating, assessing. "That's such a cute dress," she said, and I knew what was coming. "Where'd you get it? Target?" I smiled. "Just a little boutique." David's hand found the small of my back steady and reassuring. Emma's eyes flicked to him with barely concealed disdain. She'd never liked that I'd found someone who actually loved me. Then she grabbed my arm and pulled me toward her group. "Everyone, this is Sarah, my oldest friend. She's had a rough go of it over the years, but we love her anyway, don't we?" The condescension wasn't even subtle. It was right there in her tone, in the pitying looks from her friends, in the way she positioned herself as my savior. I felt David's hand tighten on my back. A silent question. "Do you want to leave?" I shook my head slightly. The first hour was a masterclass in Emma's particular brand of cruelty. She kept offering to buy me drinks, loudly, making sure everyone heard how generous she was being. "Let me get that for you, Sarah. My treat." She talked over me every time I tried to speak, redirecting conversations back to herself and her perfect life. At one point she gathered everyone close and stage whispered, "We have to remember that not everyone has been as fortunate as us. Some people are still struggling, and that's okay." She looked directly at me when she said it. I smiled and sipped my champagne, which I'd paid for myself, despite her protests, and thought about the $38 million sitting in my bank account. Just a few more hours. I could make it a few more hours. As the evening wore on, Emma's performance reached new heights. She held court in the center of the room, phone out, showing everyone photos of her house renovations. The kitchen cost more than most people's yearly salary. She made sure to mention the exact figure twice. Then came the photos from Santorini, her and Marcus on a yacht, her in a designer bikini that probably cost what I used to make in a week. She kept thrusting her wrist in people's faces to show off her new Cartier bracelet, a gift from Marcus for their anniversary. Every story, every conversation somehow circled back to money. She made sure everyone knew Marcus had just made partner at his firm. She name-dropped restaurants I'd never heard of and private clubs with waiting lists that spanned years. "We're thinking of getting a place in the Hamptons," she announced to no one in particular. "Just a small beach house, for weekends." And in every single conversation, she found a way to reference my struggles. "Sarah's so brave. Still working in retail, she told a group of former classmates. I'd actually been working in marketing before I quit, but Emma never listened to anything I said. Sarah's apartment is so cozy, tiny but cozy. She said cozy the way you'd say condemned. Each comment was precisely designed to position herself above me and me below her, like she was arranging chess pieces. I watched people start to shift uncomfortably. Jennifer, who I'd been friendly with in high school, caught my eye with an expression of horror. A guy named Tom, who'd been on the debate team, actually said, "Emma, maybe," but she talked right over him. David leaned in close and whispered, "We can go, right now. We can just leave." But something strange was happening inside me. Instead of feeling humiliated or angry, I felt calm, eerily calm. I was watching Emma perform, and for the first time in 20 years, I could see it for exactly what it was: desperation, insecurity, a woman so empty inside that she needed to fill herself up by tearing other people down. I sipped my champagne and smiled. "Not yet," I whispered back to David. "I want to see how far she'll go." The moment came during the toast portion of the evening. The reunion committee had set up a microphone for anyone who wanted to share memories or make announcements. A few people had already spoken, funny stories about high school, updates about classmates who couldn't make it, the usual nostalgia. Then Emma, who'd had at least 4 glasses of champagne, grabbed the microphone. "I just want to say a few words," she announced, her voice echoing through the ballroom. Everyone turned to look at her. She was in her element, the center of attention, the spotlight exactly where she wanted it. "First, thank you all for coming tonight. It's so wonderful to see everyone and to see how far we've all come." She paused for effect, smiling around the room. "I think it's important that we take a moment to appreciate what we have. We're all so blessed, aren't we? Some of us more than others, of course." A few people laughed, thinking she was being self-deprecating. She wasn't. And I want to give a special shout out to my oldest friend Sarah, who came tonight even though I know times have been tough. She pointed directly at me. My blood turned to ice. Some people laughed, thinking it was sweet, thinking Emma was about to say something touching about perseverance or friendship. Then Emma continued, her smile widening. "Let's be honest, Sarah's too poor to even be here at a place like this, but that's what friends are for, lifting each other up. Right?" She raised her glass like she'd just delivered a heartwarming toast, like she'd done something magnanimous and beautiful. The room went dead silent, the kind of silence that swallows sound, that makes your ears ring. 200 people, all staring at me, some with pity, some with shock, some with second-hand embarrassment so intense they were looking at the floor. I felt every single eye on me like a physical weight. The humiliation was complete and public and deliberate. Emma had just announced to everyone from our high school that I was too poor to belong here, that I was a charity case, that she was such a saint for tolerating my presence. She'd stripped me bare in front of everyone, and she was standing there smiling like she'd just done me a favor. I couldn't move. I just stood there, frozen, with my champagne glass in my hand and my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. David's arm came around me immediately, trying to steer me toward the exit. "Let's go," he said quietly. "Now, we're leaving." But my feet wouldn't work. Emma was still at the microphone, wearing this satisfied smile like she'd just pulled off a successful comedy roast instead of a public execution. She looked so pleased with herself, so certain she'd delivered the perfect blend of humor and charity. Some people were laughing nervously, unsure if they were supposed to find it funny. Others looked absolutely horrified, their faces frozen in expressions of shock and second-hand embarrassment. Marcus, Emma's husband, looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him. He grabbed at Emma's arm, trying to take the microphone from her. "Em, that's enough. Give me the mic." She brushed him off with an irritated wave. "What? I'm just being honest. Sarah knows I love her." Jennifer, who'd been giving me sympathetic looks all night, rushed over. "Oh my God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I can't believe she..." The pity in her eyes was somehow worse than the humiliation. Everyone was looking at me like I was a wounded animal, something pathetic and broken that needed to be put out of its misery. I felt David's hand on my back, gentle but insistent. Sarah, you don't owe these people anything. Let's just go. And that's when something clicked into place. He was right. I didn't owe these people an explanation. I didn't owe them my story, or my dignity, or my defense, but I owed myself something. I owed myself the satisfaction of not running away. I owed myself the satisfaction of watching Emma's face when she realized exactly how wrong she was. I'd spent 20 years being small Sarah, poor Sarah, pathetic Sarah. I'd spent 2 decades accepting her cruelty because I thought I deserved it. But I had $40 million in the bank and a Birkin on my arm and the truth in my pocket, and I was done running. I turned to David and kissed his cheek. "Trust me," I whispered. "I've got this." David's grip on my arm tightened. "Sarah, please, let's just go." "She's not worth it. None of this is worth it." His voice was low and urgent, the way you talk to someone standing on a ledge. He'd seen this pattern play out so many times over the 3 years we'd been together. Emma hurting me making excuses for her, me forgiving her, the cycle starting all over again. He was protective and angry on my behalf in a way I'd never been able to be for myself. "If you respond, you're just giving her more ammunition," he continued, his teacher voice kicking in, logical and measured. "People like Emma don't change. They double down. They make themselves the victim. You'll say something and she'll twist it, and tomorrow you'll be the bad guy who attacked her at the reunion." He wasn't wrong. That was exactly Emma's playbook, but something in me had shifted over the past 6 months. It wasn't just the money, though the money had given me breathing room to see clearly. It was the perspective. For 6 months, I'd watched Emma perform her wealth at me while secretly having more than she did. I'd seen how desperate her performance was, how empty. I wasn't the struggling girl anymore who needed to accept this treatment to maintain access to her life. I didn't need her life. I had my own, and it was better than hers in every way that mattered. I turned to David and cupped his face with my free hand. "Trust me," I said quietly. "I've got this." His expression was worried, those dark eyes searching mine for any sign that I was about to do something I'd regret. But I wasn't going to regret this. For the first time in 20 years, I was going to stand up for myself. He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I'm right here if you need me." That's why I loved him. He didn't agree with what I was about to do, but he'd support me anyway. He'd let me make my own choices and catch me if I fell. I handed him my champagne glass, adjusted my Birkin on my shoulder, and started walking toward Emma. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Every eye in the room was on me, watching to see what poor Sarah would do next. Emma was still at the microphone, finally looking uncertain as she watched me approach. Good. She should be uncertain. I walked up to Emma, and for a split second, I thought I saw fear flicker across her face. But then her smile widened, and I realized she thought I was coming to accept her public humiliation gracefully, the way I always had. She still had the microphone. Instead of backing down, she doubled down. "See, everyone? This is why I love Sarah." Her voice boomed through the speakers, saccharine and condescending. "She's so resilient. Even after everything, the failed relationships, the dead-end jobs, the fact that she still lives in that tiny apartment, she still shows up. That's real strength." Some people started to boo. Others called out, "Emma, stop!" "That's enough." But she kept going, riding the wave of her own cruelty like a surfer who couldn't see the rocks ahead. And actually, I should confess something. She leaned into the microphone conspiratorially, like she was about to share a heartwarming secret. "I specifically asked the reunion committee to send Sarah an invitation because I knew she'd never be able to afford to come to something like this on her own." My blood turned to ice. I told them, "We have to make sure Sarah gets an invite. She's been struggling, and I want her to feel included." She said it like it was a good deed, like she was Mother Teresa. I even offered to cover her ticket if she couldn't afford it. That's what friendship is about, making sure no one gets left behind. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't spontaneous cruelty. This was planned. Emma had orchestrated my attendance at this reunion specifically to humiliate me. She'd made sure I'd be here so she could parade me around as her charity project, her proof of her own generosity and success. Our entire friendship, 20 years, had been Emma's long-term project of having someone to feel superior to. I wasn't her friend. I was her prop, her mirror, her measuring stick. She'd kept me around for 2 decades because she needed someone to be less than her so she could feel like more. Marcus was pulling at her arm now, his face red with embarrassment and anger. "Emma, give me the damn microphone." But she jerked away from him, still smiling at me with that pitying expression. "What? Sarah knows I love her, right, Sarah?" The room was silent except for the sound of my heels clicking on the floor as I closed the distance between us. I held out my hand. "Can I see that microphone for a second?" Everything crystallized in that moment. All the years of accepting less, of believing Emma's version of our friendship, of thinking I was the problem, it all snapped into perfect, brutal clarity. Emma didn't keep me around because we were friends. She didn't maintain this relationship out of loyalty or affection or shared history. She kept me around to have someone to look down on. I was her before picture, her cautionary tale, her proof that she'd succeeded at life. Every loan, every backhanded compliment, every public humiliation, it was all part of the same project. Keep Sarah small so Emma could feel big. The anger I felt wasn't hot. It wasn't the red-hot rage that makes you scream or cry or throw things. It was cold and clear, like ice water in my veins. I reached into my purse, the Birkin bag I'd bought last month for $12,000, but had been too cautious to carry anywhere until tonight, and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady. I pulled up the screenshot I'd saved weeks ago, the one I'd stared at on sleepless nights, still unable to believe it was real, my bank statement. Some information was redacted for privacy, but the balance was crystal clear. $38,747,293. I also had the official letter from the Lottery Commission in my car. But the bank statement would do just fine. I looked up and caught David's eye across the room. He'd seen what I was doing, and his expression transformed from worry to something else entirely. Pride. That's what I saw in his face, pride and love, and a kind of fierce satisfaction. He nodded at me slightly, a silent message. "I'm with you. Do it." I turned back to Emma, who was still holding the microphone like a weapon, still wearing that smile that said she thought she'd won. I took a breath, and when I spoke, my voice was calm, conversational, almost friendly. "Can I see that microphone for a second?" Emma blinked, confused by my tone. She'd expected tears or anger or a hasty retreat. She hadn't expected calm. "What?" "The microphone," I repeated, holding out my hand. "I'd like to say something." Emma handed me the microphone, still confused, probably thinking I was going to thank her for her generosity or make some self-deprecating joke that would let us all move on. Marcus had stopped pulling at her arm. The entire room was holding its breath. I wrapped my fingers around the microphone and felt its weight. Then I spoke, my voice steady and calm, almost conversational, like I was chatting with friends over coffee instead of addressing 200 people who just watched me get publicly humiliated. "Thanks for that introduction, Emma. Really, very thorough." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. "I want to clear something up, though. You're right that I've been quiet about my life lately. That was intentional." I held up my phone, turning it slowly so people could see the screen, the bank statement, the balance, $38,747,293. Gasps erupted throughout the ballroom. Someone said, "Holy shit!" I kept my voice level. 6 months ago, I won $40 million in the lottery. After taxes, I walked away with just under $39 million. Emma's face went white. Not pale, white, like someone had drained all the blood from her body. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I didn't tell anyone, I continued. Not our old classmates, not my extended family, and definitely not you. I wanted to see who actually cared about me as a person versus who cared about what I could give them. The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning humming. And you know what I learned, Emma? I looked directly at her, and for the first time in 20 years, I saw her clearly without the filter of my own desperation for her approval. You never cared about me. Not in high school, not after, not ever. I was just someone you kept around to make yourself feel better, to feel superior to use as proof that you'd succeeded at life. I handed the microphone back to the stunned reunion coordinator, not to Emma. Thanks for finally making that clear. Then I turned and walked back to David, my heels clicking on the floor in the absolute silence. He pulled me into his arms and I heard him whisper, "I'm so proud of you." Emma's reaction came in stages, like watching someone go through grief at triple speed. First was denial. She laughed, this high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Sarah, what are you... That's not... You're joking, right?" She tried to grab my arm, but I stepped back into David's protective embrace. "It was a joke. I was praising your resilience. You know I love you." Then came anger. Her face flushed red and her voice turned sharp. "You're making me look bad. This is so typical of you, being dramatic, twisting everything I say." Marcus grabbed her shoulder, his face a mask of fury and mortification. "Emma, stop. Just stop talking." But she jerked away from him. "No, she's being ridiculous. You guys know I'm supportive." She spun to face the crowd, tears starting to stream down her face now, the desperation phase. "I've always helped her. I've always been there for her. Tell them." But people were backing away like she was radioactive. Nobody spoke up. Nobody defended her. Several of our old classmates were making their way toward me instead. Jennifer got there first. "Sarah, I'm so sorry I laughed earlier. I didn't... God, I'm such an idiot. Congratulations on the win." Others followed, apologizing, congratulating me, asking how I'd been. I noted cynically that some of them were already angling for reconnection, talking about how we should definitely get coffee and catch up properly. The attention on me, instead of her, sent Emma over the edge. Her meltdown escalated from crying to full-on screaming. "You're ungrateful. After everything I've done for you. I made you who you are, Sarah. You would be nobody without me. Nobody." The ballroom went silent again, but this time the silence was horrified. This wasn't sympathetic attention anymore. This was watching someone self-destruct in real time. Security started moving through the crowd toward Emma. Marcus was actively pulling her now, his hand clamped around her upper arm. "We're leaving. Now." He looked at me, his expression pained and apologetic. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I never realized." Emma was still screaming as he dragged her toward the exit. "She's lying. That bank statement is fake. She's always been jealous of me. This is all fake." Her voice echoed through the ballroom even as the doors closed behind them. The silence that followed was deafening. Then someone started clapping. Slowly at first, then others joined in, and suddenly the entire room was applauding. I stood there, David's arm around me, and felt absolutely nothing. No triumph. No satisfaction. Just tired. So incredibly tired. David and I left the reunion 20 minutes later, arm in arm, walking out with our heads high. We'd stayed long enough to talk to a few people, to accept some genuine apologies, to let the moment settle. As we headed toward the exit, several people I'd actually been friends with in high school approached. People I'd lost touch with over the years because Emma had monopolized all my time and energy. Tom, from debate team, hugged me and said, "I always thought she was awful to you. I'm glad you finally saw it." Jessica, who'd sat next to me in AP English, exchanged numbers with me. "Let's actually stay in touch this time, without her in the middle of it." Jennifer walked us to the door. "I dropped Emma as a friend 3 years ago," she admitted. "She pulled something similar with me at a birthday party, made this huge show about paying for my dinner, then told everyone I was going through a rough patch financially. I wasn't. She just needed to feel superior. She squeezed my hand. She's been a nightmare on social media ever since, constantly showing off, putting people down in the comments. I'm so glad you're free of her. The drive home was quiet. David held my hand across the center console while I stared out the window, processing everything. My phone started buzzing incessantly. Messages poured in. Apologies from people who'd laughed. Congratulations on the lottery win. Questions about whether I was really okay. And then the messages from Emma. They started angry. How dare you embarrass me like that? You're a liar, and everyone will know it. Then manipulative. I'm so hurt, Sarah. After everything we've been through, please call me so we can talk about this. Then desperate. You owe me an explanation. I've been your friend for 20 years. You can't just throw that away. I watched them come in, one after another, oscillating between rage and manipulation, like she was cycling through a playbook. David glanced at my phone. Block her. I did. I blocked her number, her social media, her email, all of it. Gone. The next morning, David showed me Emma's Instagram. She'd posted a long, rambling caption claiming I'd ambushed her at the reunion, that the lottery story was fabricated, that I was jealous of her success and trying to ruin her reputation. But the comments section was brutal. People from the reunion were calling her out, posting their own stories of Emma's cruelty over the years. You humiliated her on a microphone in front of 200 people. I was there. She showed us her bank statement. You're lying. This is who you've always been, Emma. By the afternoon, she'd started deleting posts. By the end of the week, I heard through Jennifer that Emma and Marcus were in marriage counseling, apparently watching his wife scream that someone would be nobody without her had finally shown Marcus what kind of person he'd married. He was horrified. Their perfect life was cracking. 3 months after the reunion, David and I closed on a house in Colorado, far away from Emma and everyone who'd only ever seen me as less than. It's beautiful. Mountain views, huge windows, a kitchen I actually want to cook in. But the best part is that it's ours, and nobody here knows our history. We're planning a small wedding for next spring, just close friends and family, the people who loved us before the money and will love us after. I've set up a charitable foundation that pays off medical debt and student loans for people who are struggling, the kind of help I wished I'd had when I was drowning in bills and shame. Helping people anonymously, without fanfare or credit, has given me more satisfaction than that reunion confrontation ever could. I think about Emma sometimes, about our friendship, and I finally understand what it was. I mistook familiarity for loyalty. I accepted crumbs and called it love. I stayed in a relationship that hurt me because leaving felt scarier than staying, because I'd built my identity around being her friend. The relief of being free from that dynamic is overwhelming, like I'd been holding my breath for 20 years and finally exhaled. Jennifer sends me updates occasionally, screenshots of Emma's social media. She's still posting about wealth and status, but now the comments are full of people calling her out, asking if she's apologized to me yet, reminding her of what she did. I don't feel triumphant about her fall. I don't feel vindicated or satisfied watching her reputation crumble. I just feel free. Free from performing gratitude for scraps. Free from accepting cruelty disguised as concern. Free from being someone's prop in their performance of superiority. David asked me last week if I regretted calling her out so publicly, and honestly, I don't know. Part of me wishes I'd just walked away with dignity and let her wonder. Part of me is glad I finally stood up for myself after 2 decades of silence. So let me know, did I handle it right? Should I have just walked away and taken the high road? Or did Emma deserve to be called out in front of everyone after orchestrating my humiliation? Because honestly, I'm still not sure if I went too far or not far enough.